hopefully you remember learning a little bit about where music, written down music that is, originated. It was in Italy with a gentleman named Guido d'Arezzo. And when he decided to come up with a way to write down music, he introduced us to the concept of a scale in a very concrete way. So, what is a scale? We're talking about a musical scale here, not the kind that captures a weight. The musical scale, what is it? Well, it's a collection of pitches that are falling between what we call an octave. Have you ever heard this word octave? Maybe the root of it sounds familiar to you. Oct, O-C-T. Can you think of any other words that start with that root? Maybe you thought of an octagon or an octopus. What do these things have in common? Something to do with the number 8, right? An octave is a collection of pitches that go between 8 notes. And so when we get from the first note to the last note, we could do the first one up here and the last one down here, we're going to run into the same pitch again. So let's talk about the word interval for a second. An interval is just describing the distance from one pitch to another pitch in a scale. You could have an interval of a step. That would be pretty close together. Think about taking one step on a staircase. You could have the interval of a skip, where maybe you're one of those people that instead of walking on every step, sometimes you like to skip one and challenge yourself. Nice, by the way. Sometimes you might even have something called a leap, which is even bigger distance than a skip. So I'm not recommending doing any leaps on staircases, by the way. So with those different intervals, we can understand that a scale goes infinitely in either direction. Infinitely. That means I could take a scale starting on this do and I could go higher and higher and higher and higher, and that pattern is just going to keep continuing forever. It might go past where our human ears can hear it, but it still exists. Likewise, I can start on this do and go down, lower and lower and lower, and the scale will continue in this direction infinitely as well. When we start from low and we go higher, this is called ascending or ascension. And when we start high and we go lower, we call this descending or descension. Another idea that I want to put into your brains, just the little seed of it, is that do can be really any note. So far this year, we have done our work with do as C, but for this next activity, we're going to be moving do to a different note. It will be a do on F. So, when we get ready to sing this song and learn how to move around with it, I want you to think about do actually being in the middle of where we're working. It's kind of the center, and on the outsides we'll have a high so and a low so. Before we had a low do and a high do. This time we're working with a low so and a high so, okay? And think about do being in the middle there. This is what we would call movable do, where do can be any single note that you pick. Doesn't matter which one. Whereas what we were doing before was called fixed do. It means that do is always C. They're both really useful ways of looking at music, and so now it's time to try moving our do somewhere else. By the way, fixed do, that's a really good example of something that's finite, meaning it's always the same or it's very consistent, versus infinite, which has so much more possibility. All right, friends, are you ready to learn a little bit about this song? Everybody Loves Saturday Night was created at a time when many West African countries were under European rule. And in that era, it was actually forbidden for many people to gather together to see each other. except for Saturday Night. So this song became popular with many musical groups in this genre called the high life bands in cities throughout Western Africa. And later it became known in other parts of Africa too. So this is a song that has definitely transcended one specific culture and really feels like it can belong to anybody. It did originate in Ghana and Sierra Leone and then eventually spread to other countries throughout Africa. And it can be played typically with Western instruments and traditional African instruments. You might hear people playing it with a Western drum set, electric bass, electric guitar, but then we'll also have sometimes instruments like shaker rays and traditional African drums.